those of you who are new to OMA, I just want to say a few words about it. It is an independent, nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people, Oregon consumers, choose dignified, meaningful, and affordable end-of-life services. It was founded in 1961, and OMA celebrated its 60th birthday last year. It has helped literally thousands of Oregonians to arrange burials and cremations across the state. It's not as easy for us to get discounts with mortuaries as it was in the early years, but we are evolving with changes in the funeral industry, and we do have some excellent discounts for you. And there are many new options for funeral consumers, as you'll learn today. OMA members receive the latest information via our newsletters and are offered discounts on our All's Well That Ends Well workshops. These workshops are held every month, sometimes in person, but lately almost all virtually. This is an Oregon-specific guide to end-of-life planning developed by former board member RCA Moore. And it covers who you need on your team of people to help you should you become incapacitated, and also what you hope they will do when you die. And there's a checkoff list and a list of decisions that need to be made to be ready. OMA members and now their dependent children through age 25 benefit from mortuary discounts. And these are listed under the provider tab on the OMA website. Now the list does change at times, so we urge you to keep an eye on it. We also keep a data file on each member so that when they have made decisions to use a specific mortuary, we can record it in their file in case their personal information form or other forms can't be located by survivors at the time of death. You'd be surprised how many calls we get like that. And we're able, if our member has phoned or emailed and told us their plans, then we can answer some questions and help them. Lost membership cards can be replaced, and you need these to show at an OMA cooperating mortuary when final arrangements are being made. So if you're not a member yet, I do hope you will join. We try to keep the membership fees modest. It's only $50 per adult. And recently we added back the family membership. So only $25 for all dependent children living in the household with an adult OMA member until they are age 26, at their 26th birthday. Then we hope that they will join in their own right. I mean, the pandemic has sharpened our awareness that tragically families do sometimes lose a younger member. And it's our hope that we can be helpful to them in the time of need. It is clear that every generation does need the information and benefits that OMA has. And the truth is that memberships and donations are what's funding the organization. So the memberships are important to keeping us present in the state. Have you, for example, heard of the funeral rule? The rights that it gives to every one of us. Did you know, for instance, that it's federal law for every mortuary to publish a price list and give us a copy to anyone who requests it? OMA's mission focuses on education and on advocacy. We want to create educated funeral consumers. We want mortuaries to be more transparent, but we are not against them. We can advise you how to bury your own dead if that's what you want, and more Americans are doing that. But we know that most Americans want the help of a mortuary. The key is to know how to shop and to be sure to get a plan in place ahead of time. So now let's get to our presentation. Remember to keep muted and use the chat for your questions as they come up, as they occur to you. Now, Elizabeth Fournier began her career in 1990 in Portland, where she was employed as the live-in night keeper. sleeping in a trailer in a Portland, Oregon cemetery. 30 years later, she's a one-woman funeral service in the rural town of Boring, Oregon, which, by the way, is only 19 miles from the courthouse in downtown Portland. Elizabeth owns and operates Cornerstone Funeral Services, where she's affectionately known as the Green Reaper because of her green burial advocacy. She's also the manager of Historic Columbian Cemetery, which is Portland's newest green burial choice. Elizabeth's the author of the Green Burial Guidebook, everything you need to plan an affordable, environmentally friendly burial. She serves on the advisory council of the advisory board of the Green Burial Council and is a member of their speakers bureau. She's even made a TED Talk. As will become evident during this presentation, Elizabeth's intent is not to force green burial on everyone, but to meet the needs of people grieving their loss at a very difficult time. She tries to provide the service that's most meaningful to them. And her transparency is so refreshing and somewhat rare, very rare in the industry. You can go to the Cornerstone website and see her price list openly. Cornerstone service areas, potentially the entire state of Oregon and Southern Washington. OMA has been pleased to have Cornerstone as a cooperating mortuary for several years, and the further discounted prices for OMA members can be seen on our website. So, with pleasure, I now introduce Elizabeth Fournier.
Thank you. That was gracious and glorious, and I loved it. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of me, so you don't have to look at me talk. And what I'm going to do is share some wonderful pictures and just talk about all of the options out there, talk about all the things that we can do, and then be able to answer your questions here when time occurs. All right, so here is the first slide, just to make sure you're at the correct presentation. You're exactly where you thought you would be. And, you know, my practice is really rooted in, I would say, love. It's the love of doing it yourself, being family friendly, being inexpensive. And I love being green, but again, like Susan said, it's an option. We can green things up, but if you don't want to, fantastic. I am a licensed mortician and here to help you as we need. All right, so if you take a peek here, just humor me. Imagine yourself just laying here in this grave space, even if burial isn't what you're looking for. Think about it. So is your body where you want it to be when time ends? You can't always control the factors of the death. You don't always control how you die, where you are. I know we talk about the good death all the time, that idea that everything goes smooth and fine, that you're home, you're pain-free, you're surrounded by loved ones, your favorite music is playing, you can smell your favorite food in the kitchen wafting on, but people don't always get that. And if you do, that's an amazing, beautiful blessing. But afterwards, we need to do something with your body. And this is the time to figure out, what do you want to do with yourself? Do you want to be donated to science? Do you want to be cremated? Are you traveling back east to be in the family plot? All those things need to be something that we're discussing. So holding on to that and figuring that out, super good idea. So I wanted to start with this, that idea of you having a home funeral, because really it's a broader scope, that active family participation has really been something that's ramped up these past 2 years. We have been in quarantine, we have been staying home more, and people have been reading books and watching YouTube and having discussions and having all these incredible Zoom conversations and realizing, hey, I can conduct those tasks that were commonly performed by a funeral home. You really can. People are learning that you can go into the funeral parlor and you can bathe your loved one, or you can keep your loved one at home and bathe them. You can have a visitation in your house. You can drive your person places. There's all these things that you can do. And did you know, if your person passes away at a hospital or a nursing home, you physically, yourself or the funeral home, can bring them back to your house for a while. There's all these things you have lots of control over. So it's just important to know that whatever you're comfortable doing as a family in the United States, there's only 9 states that say that they are not open to fully having the family control the funeral. And just for your knowledge, because people are interested, the states where a licensed funeral director doesn't have to be involved in your final disposition, they are Connecticut, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, Nebraska, New Jersey, and New York. So what that means is Oregon and Washington, and of course all the other places that I haven't mentioned, you're not required to purchase the services of a funeral director or a funeral home, okay? Something to keep in mind. So families can conduct different things. It's called family-led death care. And I think that's important because I am a funeral director. I have a funeral business, but I think it's really important to lay the groundwork that you do not have to hire me. You do not have to hire anyone else. You can do so many things yourself if you're comfortable. Not everybody wants to shelter their loved one at home. Not everybody's comfortable with the idea of getting the death certificate and filling it out and having the doctor sign it, or maybe getting the transportation permit or driving their person to the crematory or making the final disposition. And that's okay. If there's parts of these you want to do, great. If not, that's where a funeral director in a funeral home gets involved, okay? A couple more things about the home burial, because this is brand new information to people. And when I say home burial or home funeral, I don't always mean buried on your own property, but just the family sort of designing that someone's not going to die. They're not going to say, okay, I need a funeral home to come in right away and whisk my loved one away. You've got plenty of time to breathe into the space, figure out what's comfortable for you. And hopefully that's just exciting information for you to have. If you decide you want to keep a loved one at home, this is sort of what your refrigerator.
You got muted. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I would have just been rambling on joyously about all this and not even noticed. Not sure how that happened. Okay, thank you. So anyways, this is sort of what this looks like. It's not horribly daunting. It's just gentle packs in your freezer that you can use to cool a body. So I just want to show this. Hope it's not too uncomfortable for anybody, but just to show, hey, if you want to do this, you are welcome to do this. This is how it's done. A lot of families are deciding, well, okay, I want my person cremated or I want them buried, but why don't I have family come to the house first and maybe we can bathe. We can have family members or those who are caretaking the body or our religious group come and take care of our loved one. And we can do that. Generally, it tends to be people who are comfortable handling the person. This is something that can be done. The skin is normally sort of supple and warm to the touch, and there really isn't a lot of barriers that don't allow this. You think about it, you're giving a bath to somebody who's just sleeping gently. And moving and turning a body sometimes can be a little bit awkward, but if you have maybe 4 people, maybe 6 people, you can make this happen. And again, places like myself, if you ever decide or get into a situation where someone says, hey, please come over to our house, we want to bathe mom, and you say, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, call Elizabeth the Cornerstone and I can walk you through some of the preparations and some of the things you might need to think. So when you have somebody at home, if you're going to do everything yourself or not, because again, all the choices are yours, you're welcome to move somebody onto a shroud. You're welcome to dress somebody. You're welcome to casket somebody. You're welcome to have people over for a visitation at your house rather than paying the funeral home for doing this preparation. You can do this at your own house. You can also bring the loved one many places. I'm finding people sometimes want me to help them transport in my van somebody to a public park or somebody else's house or something. And most of these things are really open and things that you really can do. So pretty fun. Okay, so when it comes to the forms of disposition, now there's ceremony, which is bathing, visiting, talking, sharing, music, and then there's disposition, meaning you have to physically do something with the body. And that ultimately comes down to things such as burial. Often I hear, what is the absolute cheapest thing I can do to bury my person or to do something? And people assume it's cremation. You're pretty close, but actually the cheapest would be backyard burial. And that encompasses burying somebody on residential property, and obviously property that's privately owned and you have permission of the landowner. And just for your information, there are only 5 states that say bodies need to be buried in an established cemetery. Okay, these 5 states: Arkansas, California, Indiana, Louisiana, and Washington. And it's interesting, Oregon says you're fine, California below us, Washington above us. And I realize not everybody watching this is necessarily from the Pacific Northwest. I'm assuming probably the bulk of people are. And I just sort of speak to Oregon because that's where I'm licensed, that's where I'm doing my work. But nonetheless, if you're not living in one of those 5 states, you can consider backyard burial. And when it comes to this, it's not just the state rule, but we go county by county, and it's normally in a rural setting. And what I mean by that is if you live in Multnomah County in Oregon, it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of nowhere out in Troutdale or something, Multnomah County says, no, we don't want private land burial. My parlor is in Clackamas County. Clackamas County says, sure, as long as you're in the rural part of town, great. It's really easy to do. There's no special permit. It's not like you're putting an addition on the house. It's merely on the death certificate. It's just typed private residence and there's an address. It's really simple. It's really a matter of the person owning the property maintaining a record. If you sell the property, you have to disclose a human body is there. But home burials are really readily. I do these quite a bit in many counties. There's some counties out by the beach. I had a burial in Jefferson County not that long ago. And we're really looking at something like you have to have at least 1 acre of land. Probably 20 feet from the setback of the property, 100 feet from a drilled well, 25 feet from a power line. And most people with private property, this doesn't even relate to them. So that works out just fine. They say, yeah, we kind of have this field behind the house. We've got a bunch of, blackberry bushes or whatever. You can make this happen. All right. So it is an idea. It's an option. Some things you would just need to consider is obviously you have to have some people to be able to in this case, we have somebody has to move somebody from the vehicle or wherever to the resting space. You can have the funeral home take care of all the preparations and drive your person to private property. You can keep your person at home. If we're looking at saving money, the cheapest way to save money, your person passes away at home. You have family and friends take care of the body care, take care of your own death certificate. Somebody goes out in the yard and prepares the space. And then from there, you can go ahead and bring your person out and you're probably paying for some pizza and maybe some beer or something. And there you go. Not a bad deal. That's probably your least expensive way possible. Okay. So if you are considering it, another thing, this is out in Molalla. There was just a sandy, loamy pit. The person said, yeah, this is just where we sort of sit and hang out. Why can't we do this? It's way back from behind the house. There's no neighbors around. Absolutely. Someone dug that by hand with a shovel. Worked out fine. Another situation, sometimes you have to use a backhoe. Sometimes you have to use a tractor. Sometimes you have to get more people involved here. And you might have that in your group of friends, family, what have you. You might not, but it's a possibility. So again, these things can happen. They're real. And I'll move from this topic, but just wanted to let you know, again, if you have questions about this, it's something we can do. Another really inexpensive option is donating your body. So with free body donation, it's most likely going to be free. Everything from the transportation to the paperwork. Sometimes they provide 1 or 2 certified copies of the death certificate. They'll pay the state filing fee, and then they'll offer you a complimentary cremation. And with the ashes, either delivered to the home or they will mail to you, depending on what you do. There's a couple places here, BioGift at the bottom and MedCure. They have an intake, just wanting to know about the medications you're on, wanting to know a little bit about maybe the last time you had a procedure, and you can be donated to them. Other places, people say, well, we don't want to donate our loved one, but we want to help. So that's where Community Tissue Services gets involved. You can donate skin, which is wonderful. Lions Vision Gift, that's another one. People need corneas, people need help. You can also sign up on the top left here, Donate Life Northwest. That's a wonderful place to sign up if you say, hey, I want to give one of my organs. And normally you give an organ if you have a sudden cessation of life, such as an accident, a car accident, something where you were living and now you're not. If you have a slow death, well, your organs and everything pretty much passed away as well, if that makes sense. So you're not going to be able to give your kidneys to somebody, because if your body shut down, kidneys pretty much sort of moved in that direction too. So this is another way to save money. It's not a final form of disposition. It'd be the cremation would be the final form of disposition. Or if you wanted whatever they're not using for research back and you decide to bury it. So far we've talked about burial as a form of disposition. You can do that green, you can do that not green, you can do that on private land, you can do that in a mausoleum, or we had talked about the idea of you can have a cremation here with your service if you donate yourself. The next, probably least expensive option we're going to talk about, which is on the lower end of spending money and a legal form of disposition, is cremation. Now, this is an outdoor crematory, and this is based in Colorado. We don't have one of these here in the Pacific Northwest, but I thought this was much more palatable and friendly and nice to see versus kind of showing you what an actual, indoor crematory looks like. This is just lovely. Cremation is something you cannot do at home. Even if you have a wonderful burn pile, or you say you want to have a Viking funeral with your person on a boat in a lake and you want to have the flame on the arrow, we need this to be done in a licensed facility. Now, you can drive your person to a crematory, you can be in touch with them, you can have the funeral home involved. Again, different steps, different things we can do, but a direct cremation is probably going to cost you somewhere between $600 and maybe $2,000, depending on which funeral home you're using. And a way to not have to pay for much else is, again, you can have a visitation the moment the person passes away. If they pass away at the home or the nursing home, why not invite people over and have your time together then? Then you don't have to deal with the funeral home bringing somebody into their care and taking care of all the process for a visitation. They can also, get your person and bring them and do paperwork and all that, but you're going to be saving the money if you do some of these things on your own. So it is an option. Okay, and this is me, and what I'm doing here is making urns, and I'm making them out of dryer lint and flour and water. So what I'm getting at is you do not have to purchase an urn from a funeral home. You can bring something from home. You can make something. You can find something at your neighbor's yard sale. As long as it can contain the ashes, you can use it. This is an earth-friendly project I did for Earth Day on the anniversary, on the 40th anniversary, but this is earth-friendly, it's recycled, and let's face it, dryer lint from whoever's dryer and flour and water, pretty darn cheap way to house cremation ashes, okay? Another option here in the state of Oregon, in the state of Washington, in about 19 states, is we have aqua dissolution. So this is going to be an eco-friendly cremation. This machine was in Portland. This machine is now no longer in Portland, but just to kind of give you an idea. And I love the little guy back there, the operator in the black. Fun picture. So this is very sort of Star Trek-y looking. And this ultimately is bringing a body back to a really natural state. It's a biocremation or a water cremation or an aqua cremation. If you've heard of those terms, this is what that machine looks like. Ultimately, we're doing an aquamation. We're using alkaline hydrolysis, so it's no flame involved. It's eco-friendly, and the body is broken down to ash. We're going to have there's some copper coils in there that heat up, not to boiling, but they heat up. We have some pressured water, we have some alkalinity, a nice gentle water bath goes on, the tissue breaks down, we're left with a really porous, really delicate skeleton. We make that skeletal remain smaller, and then you have ashes in an urn that you can scatter or bury or keep at home, keep on your manual, whatever you want to do. The beauty of this is it's a real green approach because it reduces fossil fuels. It doesn't release any harmful gases or chemicals, and it doesn't contribute to pollution. So if that's important to you, this is an option, and it's called aqua dissolution. That is a legal form of disposition, aqua dissolution. Okay? So this is my parlor. I'm a repurposed goat barn out in Boring, Oregon. The reason why I'm showing you this is not only because I love my goat barn in Boring, and oh my goodness, do those roadies look just delicious. I'm really thrilled how they bloomed that day. But also, this is an outside visitation. Okay, during COVID, we had to come up with some really creative things, and we're still having COVID. So it's hard to say during, it's like, we're still here, people. But this person didn't have to rent my building, didn't have to pay for my electricity. They came up with their own casket, their loved one is there, and they were able to come and spend time and drive by or park or do what they wanted. And the really neat thing about this is that these visitations became a real community event, because people would be driving on the country road. Cornerstone, the funeral home here, it's on 40 acres and there's a country highway, and people sometimes would see a line of cars and they would just pop in because they assume, well, I probably know that person. I mean, it's small town America. What else are you going to do, right? There's no McDonald's drive-through to go through. So people occasionally think, oh, that's a loved one that I might be able to honor, and I might be able to spend some time. And also I might see my neighbor out there and we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. So, again, funerals, visitations, it's for the living. It's not for the deceased. So if grandma says, I don't want a funeral, and then grandma passes away, you're welcome to decide. You're not doing anything to offend grandma if you decide, I want to get together, I want to have a toast, I want to share a meal, I want to share thoughts about her, I want to play her favorite songs and have all her girlfriends sitting in the living room. How wonderful, because it's about the living, it's about who's left behind. So again, consider that. And if you're telling people, I don't want anything, just a direct cremation, nothing, keep in mind, maybe somebody will want to honor you and somebody will want to have some sort of a celebration of your life. And pretty darn, you don't have to be involved, you're not going to be there, but it's healing for them. So keep that in mind. If you just a gentle reminder and a mortician tip, just keep that in mind. Okay, so during the pandemic, we're still going on Zoom funerals, and the online visitations became very, very popular. So here's a casket in my chapel. And you see it's a metal casket. Even though I'm a green mortician, I am a full service funeral home. So whatever anybody wants, in this case, this person chose this beautiful, beautiful casket. And they wanted to be able to have their loved ones not worry about leaving their houses or coming into the funeral home or possibly getting sick. So they wanted to be able to give a link and say, okay, funeral home is putting their laptop up, and I had it up for a couple hours. Anybody was welcome to see their loved one and visit them. And we had a remote visitation this way. So again, that's an option. That's the new normal. If you live in New Hampshire and your person passes away in Alaska, you don't necessarily have to jump on a plane. Maybe the funeral home can do something like this. Most funeral homes are pretty hip on Zoom and online and all these things nowadays. So that's an option. So again, the funeral home isn't hosting a crowd. They don't have to turn on the electricity. They don't have to vacuum the floor. They don't have to restock the toilet paper. So possibly this would cost less for you than having everybody into the shop. Okay, so this is inside my chapel here, and note that the casket, it's a cardboard box, and a lot of cemeteries will allow you to bury a cardboard box. You just have to ask. There's no state rule that says you have to have a metal casket. Some will say, I guess a shroud is fine, or cardboard, or banana leaves, or whatever you want to do. Some say, well, a rigid container underneath, it's good. And in this case, a rigid, simple pine board under this man was very helpful. Reason why I'm showing this is just a wonderful man, and I really love this story. So in my chapel area, a woman just said, my brother and I were super close. Our parents died. We lived together our whole lives. And at night we would drink our tea and we'd read our books and we'd eat our apples. And she said, I just want to come see him and spend time with him. So he's not embalmed, and he's just, lying in state in the chapel, and she wanted to come see him. And those were the books they were reading. And he's holding some apples in his precious little hands. And those are flowers from their beautiful garden that they made in honor of their parents. And I was so honored to be able to help her with this and be a part of this. And then we took him and then brought him to the family home and had a burial. But wanted to point out the fact that he is not embalmed, and that's okay. There technically is embalming is never required by state or federal law. Refrigeration and cooling works great. There are some gel packs underneath him, keeping him cool, keeping him wonderful. So that way she was able to see him in the chapel all day. If embalming is requested for any reason, there is formaldehyde-free, biodegradable embalming fluids, and they're normally made from essential oils, and they can really adequately preserve the body for enough time. So consider that too. If you want your loved one embalmed, but you want to do it more eco-friendly, ask, right? You can ask for whatever you want, and hopefully whatever parlor can help you with that. So we encourage people a lot to bring their own casket to us. And this is really what it looks like when somebody brings a casket. Here's a truck bed. They have some carpet scraps down. They have it tied in with bungee cords. And this is a 100% completely legal, every 50 state, every funeral home. You can show up with your van or your SUV and you can bring a casket. The considerations need to be, if you're going to have a burial, will this fit inside the grave space? It's a good conversation to have. Also, there's handles here. They're made out of rope. This happens to be a natural casket, but there is rope handles. They didn't want to use metal. They didn't want to use toxic glue. And so they're doing it this way, but this can fit inside the grave space, and handles are really important. We have to move this lovely container from this truck into the funeral parlor. We have to get the loved one into this. We have to get this probably into my van or whatever, if the family wanted to provide their own transportation to get to the cemetery. And then when we get to the cemetery, we actually have to carry this individual to the grave. If you don't have handles, really hard to do. So we have to sort of think of the reality for all of these things. This picture just always cracks me up. This is another person who thought they would bring an empty casket to the funeral home. And I said, goodness, young man, you are one daring soul. And he said, yeah, I had to drive really slow and people kept photographing me. And I know, because society probably thinks there's a loved one in that casket. So it was an empty casket, just bringing it to me. But you know, people do the best they can. Not everybody has a beautiful Subaru where they can put the seats down and this can fit in. Not everybody can borrow the neighbor's minivan. This is what you have to do sometimes. So keep in mind, you can do a lot of different things. You can build a casket like this man right is here. This is a kit he's putting together. You can buy a casket at Walmart. You can buy one at Costco. No funeral home can refuse any sort of self-chosen container as long as it's rigid. It can be lifted. It fits into the grave. And it's always really good to have a conversation with the funeral home and say, I don't want to buy a casket from you. I want to buy one off the internet, or I want to make one, or my son-in-law is a woodworker. Fantastic, but let them know, because they probably can give you a little bit of guidance on, do you want to pay us to come pick it up? Do you need to drop it off? You know, what are you going to do here? Where are we going to go with this? Because again, communication, we're all in this together, make everybody's life easier. Let's ask the questions, okay? In most states, it's legal to transport a deceased person in a personal vehicle. And here you see, again, we have somebody, we're shrouding them, getting on the board, and then they're going to go up to the National Cemetery, because of Willamette National Cemetery, Portland, Oregon, yes, on green burial. Thrilling. It's wonderful this happens. So there's so many ways we can do this. As long as there's the dignity of the body is preserved at all times, and it's a container that doesn't impede the driver from any sort of safety or operating the vehicle in the right way, you can do this. And a lot of families said that was so refreshing. I had no idea I could drive Brother Bob from the funeral at the church to the cemetery. And I know it was only a couple miles down the road, but Bob was with me in the truck again, and we had our music playing. And it's just so neat to hear the stories from people who say, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Really awesome. All right, so this is what a shroud looks like. Some people want to forego a casket. They want to use the sheet off their bed. Great. Some people say, I want to have an actual shroud. This is made out of muslin and material like cotton, silk, wool, linen, muslin. These are fabrics are biodegradable. And a lot of these things, this is actually a pre-made shroud, but a lot of times people bring me stuff that's just laying around the house. There is material Mom used to sew, or up in the attic, there's bags and bags of fabric, and we can make things happen. Of course, we want to stay away from polyester and those sort of blends, but we can, you know, work with a lot of different items. There's some people have sheet sets that they never bothered to use. So again, we can wrap somebody with whatever you want to do. This is an EcoPod. This is another thing to do. This is environmentally friendly. It's handmade with recycled newspaper, and it's kind of mulberry bark pulp. Comes in a huge range of colors. It's definitely something which biodegrades, and it's just so cool looking. This was yellow. This was a doctor who wanted to be buried at home on a cliff. He loved the Beatles, and his idea is when the world goes to heck and we have the big earthquake and the banks of the river break down, he's going to cascade into the river and go down like the yellow submarine, like the Beatles. And I just thought, God bless you, you are fantastic. So I've got to say, my job, I've done the death care, you know, funerary work for 32 years now, and I just meet such beautiful precious humans. People are, every woman, every man, every person is so fascinating. And it's just wonderful to be able to hear people's stories of what's going on. So take a peek. These are Oregon and Washington cemeteries that allow natural burial. Okay, I'm not going to stay on the slide super long. I can always email it to you. Check out my website. It's cornerstonefuneral.com. And what you'll see is you can go to the Green Burial Grounds page, and it'll show that there's kind of a pull-out sort of like this that goes through all the Washington and all the Oregon spaces, because most of my people are from there, and you can see where you can be buried naturally. People are surprised by some of these. They say, wait a minute, I see Rose City Cemetery. That's inner city, Northeast Portland. What's going on here? They'll allow you to have a natural burial. You know, you don't know these things unless you actually know these things, right? So something to consider. Also on my website, I have a list where it's all 50 states, it's all the provinces in Canada, where you can see all the places, and it gets updated. So that's really lovely. Okay. This is Riverview Cemetery in Portland, Oregon. This is that big cemetery with the founding fathers and the huge headstones, and people like Henry Weinhardt are there. And right here in the middle of the park lies this darling little man in his burlap sacks. This was a little sweet guy who I went to his house right before he was passing away, and he said, honey, come here, I want to show you something. And he took me out in the garage and he said, these are my burlap sacks. I've had these, and can I use these? Can you wrap me in these? And I said, of course I will. So when he passed away, we came to the house, we brought him into our care, and I reminded his children, oh yes, he brought me out to the garage. And they said, are you kidding? Are you really going to do that? And I said, if with your permission, this is what he wanted. And they thought it was kooky, but they went with it. And then when we were out at the cemetery, they loved it. They thought it was so neat. So this is what he wanted. This truly honored him. And think about that. It's a free casket. It's an alternative container, something he had in his own house, didn't have to buy it. Family didn't have to shroud him, didn't have to do a darn thing. We did it at the parlor. And there he is in this incredible cemetery, which is very well known in the Portland area. So yeah, life is really fascinating like that, isn't it? Some graves look like this, where it sort of looks cemetery, but then it sort of looks natural because they use the boulders as the headstone. So that's an interesting idea. This is a cemetery out in the Estacada Eagle Creek area. And this is one where, you know, it's sort of a hybrid situation. Other graves look like this. This is one that's in the woods, and we have a kind of a natural lowering device. It was dug by hand. We'll go ahead and fill the earth back, and then that ivy and that natural foliage right there will grow on top. And there'll be a boulder for a headstone, but there's not going to be anybody mowing the grass. It's just going to look like a real wonderful wooded area. And there's some paths to walk through, so you can still get there and you can view your loved one. But, you know, some people love that. They say, hey, you know, they gardened, or they had the forest, or they always went hiking. And why do I want to be someplace where I've got to spend a lot of money in a cemetery where there's going to be all the items involved that you have to do? And what those items are, by the way, is if you're going to do any sort of a burial that isn't green, most of the cemeteries want a grave liner, some sort of a concrete liner in the bottom of the grave to protect the, you know, wavy gravy look at the cemetery. So you're paying for the grave liner. You might have a casket which is metal or kind of a varnished wood. You'll probably be embalmed. There's all these things that go into that. So you can save your money and not buy all that. What I love about green burials is afterwards, a lot of families want to grab a shovel and they want to do it themselves. They want to cover the loved one with earth. They want to take the time, lots of family participation, great time for stories and laughter, and all ages can grab a shovel or a handful of earth, which is lovely. This is what a green burial grave looks like afterwards. The earth is covered and it's sort of a rounded mound. So that way the soil can just settle a little bit over time. Okay. And this is a wonderful grave up at Herland Forest that was decorated by the stewards there with their loving hands. And just a quick rundown here about green burial, in case you quite don't understand. It's that idea of burying somebody with a biodegradable container, a body that doesn't have chemicals preserving it, and being placed directly into the ground if you're going to be at a cemetery or if you're going to be at a home. Excellent way to save your money because you're not buying all the goods and all the services. And that's where you get stuck at the funeral home, with the goods and the services. All right. Okay. So a lot of families say, well, you know, we are all buried in a tomb someplace or in a mausoleum, or we all, you know, do this more of a traditional way. Fantastic. There's a lot of families who say, rather than spend the $300 for a casket spray of flowers that's going to be not good in a couple days? Can we bring our own plants and have succulents? So this is what they did to decorate the top of the casket, and then they gave the plants to family members. Fantastic way to do that. A lot of families are deciding they want to use recycled paper for their memorial folders. They want to carpool. They want to eat sustainable farm food for their morning meals. Tons of ways to do these things. Really great. Something brilliant a family did was after they had a reception at a local hall, they told everybody, hey, come back to the house because we have some things we want to give you. And when they came back to the home, they invited everybody to step in the outdoor space and adopt a plant of their choosing that belonged to the loved one that they were honoring that day. And they loved it because not only did they thought, oh my goodness, here's all these plants. We're not plant people. We don't really want to water all these things. These were gone. So in a matter of a couple hours, everybody came and took a special plant that spoke to them. And it was wonderful. The people had something that reminded them of the person that died, and the family said, woo, we got rid of everything on the porch. And I've seen people do that when it comes down to any downsizing. You can do this with the idea of, you realize, oh my goodness, mom has lots of books and mom has lots of cookbooks and lots of stuff. You can invite people over and say, hey, take something. If you want something you loved mom, look at her scarf collection or look at her, take stuff. And it's a really fantastic way to get rid of stuff rather than you boxing up Aunt Myrtle's stuff. Why not be generous to her pals and they can take it all away? I mean, what a way to upcycle, right? What a way. Let's work for you. So something to consider, and people are always thrilled to have a new gift or something free, which is really fun. Okay, just a couple more things to talk about. Another legal form of disposition, burial at sea. You can do this if you pass away in all 50 states. Obviously, if you're landlocked, you got to get to the ocean somehow. But burial at sea is a disposition method. It releases the deceased body. We're looking at full body into the ocean. The body sinks, it decomposes naturally. And it's definitely a green burial. There's no embalming. The container isn't made out of steel or concrete. It's all biodegradable. And this is something that you can arrange. Most likely you would need a funeral home. A licensed funeral director does need to go out on the boat. You do need a contract. You can have a private boat. If not, you can contract. This is something we've been able to do. And it's interesting because once you get out in the water, somebody needs to be 3 miles off the coast and about 600 feet depth for a full body at sea. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, they really oversee those laws and regulations for the burials at sea. So Cornerstone, we happen to be a licensed person who can help you with this, and we contract with the company and these things happen. Okay, just a little bit more from me, and I want to talk about these pictures for a bit, and then I have a special guest, and then we will have time for questions. Back in December 2020, I was very fortunate to be a part of the first natural organic reduction at Herland Forest in Washington. And you might have heard of natural organic reduction. It's human composting. This is definitely in a lot of articles nowadays. People are talking about this. It was great to do this. And what I wanted to do is, I have Walt Patrick, who is the lead steward at Herland Forest here. And I want to turn my time over to him now and give him some time up to the top of the hour to actually talk about what the heck natural organic reduction is. So I'm going to mute myself. And Walt, I'm going to put the screen down here in a little bit, but if you want to take it away.
Walt here. Can y'all hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can, and welcome. Glad to see you again.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We've been doing sustainability research for over 30 years. And so, and part of that work involves the natural organic reduction of large mammals. And so in Washington and Oregon passed the law. They kind of looked to us as leading the way because we're the ones with the greatest experience in this. And so we brought together this technique of using what we call a cradle, which is you see there in the middle, which is an insulated coffin. And it's on these big wheels that allow us to rotate it back and forth, because compost, you have to rotate it in order to keep oxygen to the decomposition process. And there up the left, you can see Elizabeth overseeing the investment of the remains in the coffin. And then we use wood chips from our forest that we then chip up and then use as providing the carbon needed to go ahead and balance out the remains to transform the decedent into soil. And then you can see on the last picture, Elizabeth and I are putting the lid onto the cradle, and away it goes. And so it takes a couple of months for the body to transform into soil. In winter, it of course takes longer. You can see we do this outside in the forest, not inside of a commercial warehouse or anything. So it's intended to be as a minimal amount of fossil fuels as we can work out. And so in the top picture, you can see right in the center of the cradle, there's the thermometer, because the process of decomposition is thermogenic. The body gives off heat. And so we bring the temperature up to 131 degrees for 3 days, which satisfies the law. Now, the reason behind this is that in the state of Washington, as Elizabeth mentioned, you are not allowed to be buried on private land. You may be buried in a licensed cemetery, but that's it. And so if you have a piece of land that you love and want to be joined with that land forever, this is how you can go about it in Washington state. It also has relevance in Oregon, in that, as Elizabeth mentioned, if you bury a body on a piece of property, you have to give notice to any potential future buyer. Now, if you use the organic reduction, then that is not the case. Then you can go ahead and use the remains on the property to nourish plants and so on. And it does not have to be reported to anyone else. So that's what we do. And so we're on the north side of the Columbia River. We joke about being in the extreme northern Oregon, but we very much serve the Portland area and Oregon. This year, we've reduced 4 people from California and 1 from New York. And so it's something that is catching on quite broadly. So happy to go into any details about that. And just one issue on cost. The cost for this process is $3,000, but part of that involves having a funeral director actually assist with the laying in of the body. So if somebody wants to do that, again, the family has full control over the whole process. So the family can bring the body, the family can lay the body into the cradle, and all of those reduces costs. So it's probably the cheapest way to do that sort of variation on disposition. Saw a couple of questions. Usually, so the material goes into 55-gallon drums. We're talking about a cubic yard of compost coming out of this. So you're looking at about 3 55-gallon drums of material. And we hold the material for up to a year so that people can take possession of it at a time when it's convenient for them. This is, for example, this would not be a good time to have 3 55-gallon drums of compost delivered to your driveway. So we hold it here in the forest until people are ready. And you don't have to take all 3 drums. For example, we had a family from California come up and pick up 2 of the 3 drums. And the 3rd drum will be used to plant a tree in the Herland forest. So the bones are slow to decompose. So we go ahead and process the bones separately at the end. I mean, after a couple of months, we go ahead and process the compost and remove, for example, we remove any teeth because of the mercury fillings. We're very proud that the analysis on the compost we're producing shows no detectable levels of mercury. And that's because we go through and remove anything that could be a problem. So if there's an implant or whatever, we will go ahead and pull that out at that point before the material goes for its final processing and aging. Let me see if that was all the questions. If there are more questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Walt. You're always a treasure trove and a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, so if Susan would like to read some chat questions, I think we can do that.
Okay, let's see what we have in here. One question that I saw was, what if you're not in business when we die? Would we transfer, or what would we do?
Okay, so if you have actually signed up with Cornerstone Funeral Services in Boring, Oregon, if I'm not here, I'm hoping my daughter will be the next undertaker in line and she can help you. Now, if she chooses to not do that, then I'm sure there might be somebody else. I don't plan on leaving my work anytime soon, but you're right. The building can be burnt down. Anything can happen. My door can be closed. You do not lose any money. We merely transfer everything to another funeral home who be comparable to help you. So if funds are given, they're held by a trust in the state of Oregon. And again, no money is commingling in the funeral home bank account. So I'm not shutting the door and going shopping with it. It is definitely can come back to you or be transferred to somebody else to take care of your end of life plans. You lose nothing.
Isn't it true, Elizabeth, that all, unless a person has a reason to get money out of their estate in order to be eligible for an entitlement program like Medicaid or something, Medicaid or food stamps, that all the plans are held in insurance policies and they are refundable?
So there is,
you can't do a revocable.
yes, you can.
You have
So
to
to
do a
speak to that, yeah, some funeral homes use funeral insurance, some use funeral trust. I use a trust because there's no health questions asked. Families can make as little as $5 payments a month, whatever it is. And my trust company is very, very kind. If you miss a couple payments, you're not canceled. It's fine. So that's one really lovely piece about it. That's why it's consumer friendly. You can make it revocable or irrevocable. You can make a choice of what to do. And I never really encourage people to be irrevocable unless they know that Medicaid will be coming in and they'll be looking at it like it's an asset. But otherwise, you can do whatever you'd like. And you can have all your monies back whenever you'd like if it is revocable.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Another question, is there a cost to transport the body to your facility?
Well, yes, if you're going to be driving your loved one, no, I'm not going to charge to receive them. If I drive them, then yes, we have an itemized price list. All funeral directors and funeral homes have a general price list where everything is itemized, all the goods, all the services, everything is there. So what I talk with families, if you want me to transport them, how else am I serving you? What am I doing? Do you just need me for my van to get to point A to B? Am I taking care of a death certificate? And so we can go from there and just piecemeal what work you need done, or do you need me to fully act as your mortician and take care of everything from beginning to end?
Isn't it true that in all cases of body donation or bio gifts, there's a chance that the body might not be accepted? Shouldn't there always be a backup plan?
Always good. And it's always good with everything possibly to have a backup plan. And what I mean by that is, for instance, with the body donation, you can sign up for it, you can be ready to go. But when the time comes, the questions are going to be asked: what medication you're on, what is your height, weight ratio, are you proportional, have you had a procedure in the hospital in the last 12 months, just to make sure you fully recovered, there's no sepsis, no infection. So there could be something which kind of kicks you out of that plan. So a backup plan is always good. Another thing to mention is, for instance, some people want to be aqua cremated and they want to do that in Portland. Right now in Portland, we don't have a machine. So we have to bring loved ones down to Roseburg, Oregon, or we need to bring them up to Kent, Washington. No problem. We do it all the time. But if you want your aquamation to happen in the city of Portland, again, maybe you need a backup plan because your loved one will need to travel out of the county for that to happen. So always good to have an open conversation, let people know what you want to do. And since we're talking about plans, if you can take it easy on the people who might be in charge of, let's say, your ashes, and don't ask for something such as, I want to be scattered on the top of Mount Etna or something, because it's a burden for families sometimes. They have mom's ashes, they can't afford to get to Italy, they don't have a passport, they don't have the time, and they feel like they're failing mom. So plans are awesome, but make it in the scope of comfort for everybody as well. And if you're, whoever's left behind is really queasy about the body donation piece, again, maybe talk about what would be comfortable for them, because you're not going to be here, but they are.
What about scattering ashes? What are the laws regarding where you can do that? I'm especially interested in California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska.
So the West Coast primarily has the same rules. If you're going to do this on private land, ask for permission from the landowner. You can do this in the forest. You can do this on a lot of land that isn't sanctioned for other purposes, such as a golf course, or you can't bury or scatter at a cemetery unless actually you've talked to the cemetery and you've paid for that right. The big one is the beach. People talk about the beach. The law reads 3 miles off the coast. Now, many people go to a pier, they stand on the shoreline, they scatter cremains. It's not going to hurt anything. Cremains are very pure. However, there are rules, because what if it was Memorial Day? And what if everybody took their box of ashes and everybody stood on the shoreline and everybody decided they're going to pour out their ashes, and then all of a sudden there's a big wave and all the ashes come back and they're on the beach? Again, it's not going to hurt anything, but there are rules for a reason, and it just makes sense to actually have these commingle into the water versus sort of hang stagnant there on the coast. So 3 miles, but you can take somebody on a hike, you can take somebody to a river. I always behoove people to do this when there's nobody around, because there seems to always be someone who wants to act as the cremation police and wants to come up to you and say, you're breaking the rule, when you're really not. You can scatter at a river, you can scatter at moving water, you can do that, but it really ruins your cemetery and your private time if someone's going to come and, you know, tell you you're being bad.
Do the bones decompose? Charlie, in what? Is this just generally?
I think that's for Walt.
Yeah, Walt answered that question. There is another one. They say they have a contract with the Neptune Society in California, and they asked if all the options that you've discussed will be available to them.
Well, it depends what your contract is. And the reason why is most times when a funeral provider, and cremation is a funeral provider because there's a licensed funeral director who was in charge, you have an itemized statement of goods and services. So it's not a matter of, hey, cremation place, we give you $1,000. It's actually lined up what that $1,000 pays for. So if you actually signed up for a direct cremation, then that is what your form of disposition is going to be. If you've now had a change of heart, you might want to call them and see if it's revocable, and you can go ahead and do something else, because if you don't want to be cremated, you probably don't want to have your dollars invested with a cremation society.
The last question on here was if we have prepaid with Cornerstone and they end up moving out of the state where they inevitably die, does the trust money get transferred out of state?
So that's a really good question. People ask that a lot. I encourage people quite a bit to sign things up revocably. So that way it's fluid. If you decide you're going to move to Arizona, or you decide all of a sudden you really can use that money because you're not financially doing well, or if you change your mind, you can have it back, which is nice. Now, people pass away all the time on vacation. If you are someplace drivable, someplace Washington, Oregon, myself, my husband, we'll come get you. No problem. We'll come get you. You can use that. If you're a little further away, let's say you're in Nebraska, then what's going to make the most sense is if you have something set up, let's say for aqua or flame cremation, we'll find a low-cost mom and pop shop, and we'll find somebody who will do this for you, not expensive. We'll release the money from the trust company to help fund that funeral home. So that's a good way to do it. It doesn't naturally transfer because you have it locked in. I'm not a corporation. I'm sort of a standalone parlor. I don't have affiliates, but one neat thing that happens is occasionally people will sign up for their pre-arrangements. They think they're doing their right due diligence by putting it and locking it away in their safety deposit box. Well, a year later, when their child clears out the safety deposit box, they say, oh my goodness, mom paid for a cremation. That's fine. My trust company will happily refund the money to the family. So you don't lose it. It's just probably shocking to find out that mom took the time to make other plans.
And is that true of the mortuaries that use insurance policies instead?
You know, I can't speak to them. And the reason why is I haven't used an insurance policy for 18 years, so I'm not really sure what the rules are there. I think that there's a company such as they're called Dignity, and they're the largest provider within the North America of funeral homes and cemeteries. I believe those are all transferable wherever you go, but I don't know. So I would say check in with that to make sure that's at this point in 2022, that's accurate.
A couple of questions for, I think for Walt, but the first one, did we have the answer to do the bones decompose?
Yes.
Oh, you did answer that. Okay. How much material remains to take away after organic reduction?
Yes, he answered that one as well.
Okay, that you answered that during your presentation, didn't you?
Mhm.
Okay. Are there emails and phone numbers for the presenters? Can the list of green burials be provided to OMA? Yes, and you mentioned that those were on your website, I think, Elizabeth, right?
Yeah, and if somebody wants that actual picture, it's a PDF file. I'm more than happy to email it to you. So I think if you want to put my information in the chat, the funeral home website, and then my email is elizabeth@cornerstonefuneral.com. You also can call me. What I encourage people to do is, even if you're out of state or I'm not your funeral home of choice, you can still pick up the phone and ask the question. Information is free, so take advantage of that.
You haven't said anything about death doulas, and I know that there are organizations of people who are trained to help families with burial.
Yes. So that's a wonderful, wonderful option. And that is something that happens a lot of times prior to death. So I've been kind of focusing on once you've passed away, how to save money and what to do. So that's kind of a whole other topic of if you're, but yes, that fits into it. There is wonderful death doulas, end of life doulas. If you don't know what that is, actually, I see Nicole. Do you want to unmute yourself and chat?
I can talk on that a little bit. Sorry for my appearance. I didn't expect this.
A new presenter. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, so I am a death doula here in Portland, and similar to what Elizabeth does in the sense of pre-planning, we can help, not everybody, but I can help in the sense of directing you to end-of-life services, funeral homes, cemeteries, or just educate you on your options. And death doulas also can help fill in the gaps that hospice can't necessarily do or don't have the time to do. And right now there's a lack of care right now in hospice because of COVID, and there's not enough hospice. So death doulas are kind of a supplemental support for the community. And I am also happy to put my email or my website in the chat as well.
And you can see work that an end-of-life doula like Nicole does, or a funeral provider like myself do. Instagram is a great place to look because we put a lot of information there. So maybe I'll put my Instagram handle because we put pictures and you kind of can see that unfolding very gently. And Nicole does as well. So that might be a way just to kind of take a peek and see what's going on.
Yeah, but the death doula can help a family in that transition and guide sort of much as hospice staff do, although you don't touch the body, a hospice nurse would, and would help a family to wash a body and get it ready for burial.
That's correct. And not all death doulas, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of them will focus on being home funeral guides and will help you with all of those things you might not be thinking of that you would need in order to have a home funeral if you wanted that that sort of service for your loved one. So a lot of us are well educated in that. We're not licensed funeral directors per se, but yeah.
Well, thank you. It's good to have you with us. Someone has asked, why was the aquamation machine removed from Portland, and will it be replaced in the future?
Awesome question. Okay, so the Aqua machine was held by a place called First Call Mortuary Services. They weren't a licensed funeral home, but they provided services to funeral directors. They also provided embalming, cremation, things like that. They were the first adapter in Portland. They had the machine, but a corporation has come along and has bought out that entity, and the corporation decided that they don't want to deal with it anymore, and they sold the machine off to a company in California. So will somebody have another machine here? Oregon, Portland especially, is ripe for that. I don't know of anybody right now looking to acquire one, but it's a fantastic business opportunity and it's a fantastic concept if someone has any interest. So it's not going to be replaced where it was.
It's an example of the ever-changing quick movement in the death care industry. Question about removal of items after cremation, such as teeth. I am trying to visualize this process. How exactly do you sift through the ash remains?
Susan, excuse me, that's my question. I think I used the wrong word. It's not cremation. I'm remembering when Walt was speaking and we saw those 3 steps, and the middle step looked like it was full of bark chips. And that's where apparently the body dissolves. And then you must sift through that, the remainder of that, to find these items, like teeth and perhaps a copper coin that was swallowed in childhood or something. You never know. Could be.
Walt here. Yes, this is very much a hands-on process
Yeah.
for us. So if you think about comparable to making wine, so you have the grapes that are crushed, and then the fermentation creates the alcohol, and then the wine is then processed through and put away into barrels to age. So we do that kind of a situation where we let the natural process go forward and then sift through the remains before they go onto the barrels where they then age. So that's where we
Steps, yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah. So it's at that end of the first step before the second step that we go through and remove, and often usually we know what we're looking for. And usually, our primary concern is the dental fillings.
What I love about all of this is that it is so intentional, so specific. What a fine way to end our lives if each day I could be that way, to be perfectly in tune and intentional. Anyway, thank you, both of you, Elizabeth and Walt. Wonderful. I appreciated everything you said and bring to us. Thank you.
You're welcome, April. I love that you said that. That's a really great thing for us to be thinking about. And since you opened the door to the idea of teeth, no one's asked this question, but when it comes to someone who's going to be cremated or buried, often people will say, well, make sure I get dad's gold teeth. And speaking to that, in my 32 years of doing this job, I've never come across a dentist who wants to remove someone's teeth. I've often talked to families and said, if you want to find a dental professional, or if you have a family member who wants to do this, you're more than welcome to. And they say, well, I figured, the mortician took the teeth. No, we don't want to be prying around someone's mouth with pliers. I have no interest. No one I've ever met all these years has any interest. Never even met a dentist who has an interest. So gold teeth are cremated or buried with a loved one. Once a cremation happens, there's such a high heat, mostly with the flame, that they just sort of break apart. They're really nothing. It's not a matter of sifting through ashes later and seeing these fillings. It's, there's not much going on there. So if you do want the teeth out, if that's a really important thing to you, then come up with your own preparation for that, because there aren't funeral directors and crematory operators who are profiting off people's gold teeth. That's not really common. Could be happening somewhere, but
Amen. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Now, that's all the questions that have been written. If there's anyone who really doesn't type or something and has a burning question, we can't see everybody. There's 42 people on the call. We'd have to scroll through, but there is a button at the bottom for reactions, and you could raise your hand if you want to speak, or speak up now if you want to ask a question. We have a couple more minutes before we need to close.
Anything you're thinking, just go ahead and unmute yourself and lay it on us.
Okay, Anne?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
had a
unmute.
question in the chat for Walt. I wanted to know what your contact information is, Walt, and then also I wanted to know the same question that was given to Elizabeth. Can we contract in advance to you? And if so, what happens if you're not around by the time we die? Or perhaps we just have to wait until we die and then see if you're still around. What's the procedure?
Walt here. Great question. Thank you, Ann. Let me go describe our process a little bit. So we steward 40 acres, of which 20 acres is the actual forest. And when somebody decides they want to be interred in the forest, they generally come and get to meet the trees and the firs and the oaks and the pines and pick a spot in among the trees. It's like picking your neighbors at a retirement community. And so they decide where they want to be. And at that point, we go ahead and dig the actual grave. It's not, we don't wait until somebody dies. We do it right then, and it's their future home. We then fill the grave full of wood chips. And so it's basically a done deal. Now, if indeed, we drive off a cliff on the way to town, that's covered by, to having a licensed cemetery, we have to have an endowment care trust fund. So a portion, 10% of the right of interment goes into that long-term fund, so that if indeed we're not here, then the state of Washington will use that money. It's first of the year. I just filled out the paperwork on our trust fund, and it's at $46,000, and they'll use that money to pay a sexton to dig the grave and inter the remains and seal it back up. The land itself would go to the Washington Heritage Society, and all of our records would go to keep record of who is interred in the Herland Forest. So if we're not able to carry on, there's a large trust fund set aside to fund the delivery of services. Now, our intent is to very much find a new generation to pick up and carry on our work, to explore the concept of death care and intentional community, which is what is the support of what we're doing here. And so we're actively looking for interns to move forward on this project. But if indeed that doesn't happen, then the bank has the money to make sure that the resources are made available to the people who've contracted for them.
I still have a further question if I can do. Is it okay if I ask a
Yes,
follow-up?
go ahead.
Well, it's my understanding that, my husband does a lot of composting, and I bet if he died tomorrow, this is what he'd want to do. But it was my understanding that you have to keep turning, you put it in a tank and you keep turning it. But when you say you dig the hole first and fill it up with wood chips, it sounds like you're putting the body directly in the ground. So which is it?
Both, depending on whether you go with enhanced natural burial. When people come to us and want to go back into the biosphere directly and be a tree, then we do that in what's effectively a large clay flower pot. And so we put 100 gallons of wood chips in the grave, add the body, more wood chips, special tubing to provide water and oxygen, and let nature take its place. That's that. Now on the composting, where somebody wants to have the remains go somewhere else, then that's why we have on that big rack, so that we can roll the insulated coffins back and forth to give the tumbling effect. So, if they're going it in the ground, we would prefer to allow the fungus and the natural organisms to carry the process through naturally, and support the development of the mycological network that is essential to the health of the tree. So, a forest is yes.
Oh, so then if you chose that option, then would that be considerably cheaper than the composting?
The permanent grave facility?
Yeah, the
we
permanent
charge
grave
the
where you
same
just
amount.
put the body into the grave. Is it still
We charge the same
$3,000?
amount. Yes.
Oh, okay. And can you put your contact information into the chat, please?
Mark did it.
Already did.
Yep.
Oh, you did. Okay, I just didn't see it yet. All right, thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I
And if you
think-
just Google Herland Forest, you'll get us.
Okay,
Herland Forest. You can Google that and you would find him and find their website. For people who don't know, and many of you seem to know about it, but body composting has been legal for over a year, right, in Washington state, but it only got approved in Oregon this last legislative year or session, and Colorado and Oregon sort of fought the way to be the second state. We're the third state. So in fact, is there anyone else besides Herland Forest that's doing the body composting in Oregon?
So there's nobody in Oregon doing it. Walt is the closest. He's 80 miles from downtown Portland. Oregon is getting legislated right now as far as the licensing process. And I happen to be on that committee with the Oregon Mortuary and Cemetery Board, where we're trying to figure out the rules, regulations, and how businesses can get up and running, but it has passed. It is something that can be done, and Oregon was the third state.
All right, anyone else with any questions?
There's a little bit more broader of a question, I think. Are there any places doing are there places doing green burials in every state? Specifically
Yes.
Virginia, who's asking.
Yes, yes. So look at the website cornerstonefuneral.com, go to the Green Burial Gardens, and you will be amazed at all of the places you see that's listed by state, and you'll see many places.
Great. Somebody asked about the recording of this. Yes, it's being recorded and it'll be posted on our website next week. And when I post that video, I'll make sure that Elizabeth and Walt's information are part of that video that will be posted on our website next week.
Well, I think we should draw to a close if the questions are answered. I'm sure more will come up later, but that's why OMA keeps on keeping on. I do want to mention to you that we have, people have kindly donated us plots and mausoleum niches that they did not use, and they used it as a tax write-off. There's a little bit of a complicated process with the IRS that they must get documentation. But anyway, we have these plots for sale, and those are posted and described on our website. We've gotten a value of them, and some of them are shockingly high. But if they are of interest to any of you, or any people that you know want to be buried in a more traditional way, or have a body placed in a casket in a niche, they are for sale at half price at OMA. So please spread the word. We have sold 3 plots in the last year. It's very helpful to us to liquidate these assets, because we aren't able to do anything with them. And the other thing I want to mention is that we do need volunteers to work with us. We have some slots on our board of directors. We would like to have people in all the regions doing, contacting mortuaries, getting price lists for us, and perhaps even organizing sort of regional groups and councils. So we hope that you will keep up with us and the news on the website, and get on our email list if you are not already. And please join if you're not a member. Is there anything else that we need to cover? Then I think we must thank our presenters very much. And thank you, Walt, for appearing and answering questions. Very interesting.
Thank you all. Have a beautiful
presentation.
day.
And Elizabeth, thank you.
My absolute pleasure.
We'll see you again a lot, we hope.
Be healthy out there.
All right, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Love you. Talk to you soon.